same thing. So there are certain ones that fall in different places for different reasons. But the big hunting states, or excuse me, the big buck states tend to kill more does. So how is it that two states, like Ohio and Michigan, can have the same yearling harvest rate, yet one is viewed as a big buck state and the other one isn't? It's so simple it sounds stupid. The more bucks you kill, the fewer the number of older bucks the next year. I'm amazed at how many people don't recognize this. We talk about killing young bucks. It doesn't matter whether you let young bucks go, as long as you kill the same percentage, there's going to be that many older bucks next year. So you can have two states or regions, both with the same percentage of yearlings in a harvest, yet one has a lot more older bucks in the herd. How can that be? Because one state is killing fewer of the existing bucks. Let's take a look. This is a really simple model here. I'm just looking at bucks in the herd. And I'm starting out with a herd, two herds. They each have 100,000 animals in them, and they each start out with a 50-50 split of older bucks and younger bucks. And let's have one be kind of similar to Ohio and Indiana, or let's say Ohio. They're killing 50% of their yearlings, and they're killing 40% of their bucks. And down here in a Michigan-like state, we're killing 50% yearlings, but we're killing 60% of the total buck population. So what happens? If you follow it for just 1 year, up here in this first state, you've got 20,000 yearlings killed and 20,000 older killed, and you have a large doe harvest. Down here in this more traditional state, whoops, I clicked too far forward. Down here in this more traditional state, we're killing 30,000 of each, and we have a small doe harvest. So what happens? At the end of for the next season, 40% of your bucks are yearlings here and 60% are older deer. Killed the same percentage of yearlings. Down here, it's the opposite way around. You have mostly yearlings. You work on a model like this, the more you kill, the more yearlings you have the next year. And how many yearlings you have the next year doesn't depend on how many yearlings you kill. It depends on how many does there are and what their rate of recruitment of their fawns is. So if you got, let's say in a herd of 100,000 bucks, you'd have 300,000 does. They're going to bring, if they have a recruitment rate of 1, they're going to bring 150,000 new bucks year after next. So are we really different than Indiana and Ohio? Oh, you bet. We're going back with Michigan data right here to the 1950s when we were killing 80,000 bucks a year. They didn't even hunt in Indiana, Iowa, Illinois. This is Indiana right here. They first hunted in 1954, I think it was, and they killed a couple of thousand total deer, mostly does and fawns, while we were killing 80,000 bucks. We're different. They don't have a hunting culture. Their grandfather wasn't shooting every buck that moved 80 years ago. They had no deer. They all drove up north. We used to see a stream of them going through in the 50s. What did a buck poll look like back then? Same as they do today, maybe a little worse. We had one buck rule from 1921 to 1985. I grew up under one buck rule. The goal, be the first one back to the cabin with a buck. First in wins the honors. No concept whatsoever of continuing the hunting season. Never heard of the concept of passing a buck until I was 55 years old. You shot the first buck you saw, the earlier the better for bragging rights, then you opened a beer and played cards. This buck was killed right in the next county north of here. It was the second buck I ever killed. It's probably a 2.5-year-old 8-point, a beautiful animal. I killed him at 8:15 in the morning on opening morning in 1980. I was living right here in married housing on this campus. But I would have shot anything with antlers that came through. Anything. If he had one 3-inch antler on his side, I was going to shoot him. 4 years earlier, 3 or 4 years earlier, I shot my first buck also on state land in Clare County. That was a half-rack 3-point. That's what we did back then under 1-buck rule. And that's the culture that guys like me have handed down to our children and grandchildren in Michigan. That's why we're different. This is how to spot a elitist hunter there on the right. It's the Budweiser. We carried that. These are in 2-buck years here. We shot any antlered buck we could get to, but we did that before too. And I'm not putting Fred up here to put him down in any way. He was part of the Michigan culture. He's our most famous hunter. He shot any buck that he could get his hands on in those early days. That was our culture. There's nothing wrong with it. But understanding it allows you to understand how to regulate. It's a gotta get my buck culture. 1-buck rule won't help that. Only 4% of hunters even get a second buck. If we remove all the second bucks, as I said earlier, we're still one of the worst states in terms of buck pressure. And I already mentioned South Carolina. Did you know that over 40% of our hunters, last year was the first year that if you bought a single tag, you couldn't buy another single tag? 40%, 41% of hunters, that's 250,000 hunters, were operating under 1-buck rule last year. What was the yearling harvest rate in, I'll go to 2014, that's last year on data for. You know what the yearling harvest rate in the southern lower peninsula was? 73%. 40% of our hunters under a 1-buck rule, 73% yearling harvest. Guess what it was in the UP? 20%. Same state, same 2-buck possibility for a tag anywhere in the state. 1-buck rule is not the answer for us. States like Ohio and Indiana kill fewer deer per square mile and probably fewer deer per hunter. But we're not going to do that in Michigan, are we? No way that Michigan's going to allow that to happen. You want to have a quota? You want to no longer have over-the-counter sales? How are you going to do that? How are you going to reduce the deer harvest? It just doesn't fit into our culture. But there's a way around it. Just have a lower harvest for 1 year. That's all it takes. Kevin said earlier. Just 1 year. And what you do is once that one cohort of yearling bucks is carried forward, they're in the herd. You have a larger number of older bucks the next year, and you're passing those yearlings, but you don't notice it because within 2 years you're killing the same number of bucks you did before. You don't have to reduce the buck harvest to advance age structure. A properly designed APR spares a large percentage. It's about 72% is the estimate up in the Northwest 12. Once established in the 2.5-year-old age class, you reach a new steady state. So they've had antler restrictions in Leelanau County. That's a small peninsula right at the little fingertip of the mitten. That was 3 points on a side, instituted in 2003. The yearling harvest before was 65%, and within a few years it was 30%, and it has maintained 30% since then. 3.5 and older harvest was I made a mistake. I knew I would. I knew I would. It was 15% before and 40% after. The sacrifice is 1 year of low buck harvest. So this is Leelanau County up here. Let's just look at the top chart first. And each one of these points is the number of bucks harvested in Leelanau County. And these two are before, and this is the first year. That's the sacrifice right there. The number of bucks killed dropped way down. But look what happened the next year. It dropped up to above where it was in 2001. And then only 1 year after that was below the mean prior to implementation. Now some of that might be because the herd rose a little bit, but it should come back up to very close to where it was if the herd is stable. And you can titrate that, you can change that to the level you want, by harvesting does. Down here, we have the harvest rate in the surrounding 12 counties. The 12 counties that are now under APRs, they weren't then, and they had falling buck harvests. And that's because their hunter numbers were falling. But they didn't fall in Leelanau County. You ever hear people talk about how hunters are going to quit if they're under APRs? I don't think so. I think it'll make them more successful. This is hunter success down in Leelanau County. And hunter success is just bucks killed, the percentage of hunters that got bucks. And it's right about where it was before. It's actually been rising up again a little bit, probably because the herd has been growing there a little bit. Now these are hunter numbers. We've had a precipitous fall since 2001. This red line is the northern lower peninsula. We lost between 20 and 25% of our hunters there. UP also, during that time. This is under traditional deer management. That's those other 12 counties. Every one of those counties was down. The only county out of those 13 counties that kept a stable number of hunters was the county that had APRs. Now we don't know that that's going to happen everywhere, but we don't discount that that APRs might make hunters more excited and more likely to go out into the field. And by the way, they had increased time in the field as well. Notice a little drop off the first couple of years and it came right back up. Just about done. I wrote an article a few years ago in Woods and Waters because I felt that Leelanau County had become the best deer hunting county in the state. I remember the first time I met some of you guys here. Was up at a show in Traverse City, and I heard about it for the first time, and it was a well-kept secret for quite a while. And one of the drivers for some of these guys to start the Northwest 12 things is they were getting too many hunters on state land in their hunting areas. That's Clay McNitt. He's here with us tonight. Those are the 5 best bucks he ever killed, and they were all under APRs, and he's killed 2 more like those since. Actually, better, Clay? Now we go to the Northwest 12 counties. 3-point unassigned in 2013, supported in a survey by 68% of hunters. And we're in the 3rd year, and this is what happened to the percent of yearlings, and I'm comparing them to the NLP, the Northern Lower Peninsula. We had 2 bad winters there, so the yearling harvest was going to drop for a couple of years anyway. But the drop was precipitous. It was higher beforehand for the Northwest 12, and it dropped to much lower, down to about 20 to 30%. Look at 3.5 and older bucks, we went from 15% up to close to 40%. Massive changes, massive. And we're hearing it all, just the buzz on social media is just amazing. Hunter numbers have been tracking. They were actually a little higher earlier in the 2000 decade. They've been tracking nicely between the Northwest 12 and the NLP. We might have a little drop off there, but we saw that in Leelanau County too. We need to wait a couple more years and see if that recovers. My guess is, with everything we're hearing this year, that next year that hunter number is going to jump up. Hunter success on bucks, that dot right there is a drop off. That's the one sacrifice. They came right up. They were tracking with the Northeast Lower Peninsula, and they came right up the 2nd year. So you're back in business. Rather than only having a 20% harvest of bucks like they do in Ohio, we can continue to have a 30% harvest of bucks, only they'll be older, and you just need 1 year of sacrifice to do that. You don't have to sacrifice every single year like they do in Ohio. And this is both sexes. So both sexes dropped off. Nobody is losing any venison there. So I'm going to conclude this with 1 buck rule probably will not help Michigan, and it's probably not doable. Anybody spending time advancing, and I hope you'll carry this message for us. Anybody spent time advancing the 1 buck rule in this state is not paying attention to the thing that we all want, which is advancing age structure by a means that we know does work in this state. And there's only so many activists. So if we split the activists in half, we have less influence. Leelanau County was a phenomenal success. Buck age structure was advanced. Hunter enthusiasm and support was high. Over 72% of their hunters were in favor of continuing after 5 years under APRs. And they were the only county in that region where hunter numbers remained stable. Preliminary results from the Northwest 12 are tracking very close with Leelanau. Years 4 and 5 will tell us if hunters are embracing this. And again, I'll make a prediction. We're going to see hunters uptick over the next 2 or 3 years. Hunter recruitment, retention, and reactivation of former hunters are crucial for the future of Michigan hunting. We think that APRs are the answer for Michigan. We're hoping for a APR across the state. 3 points on a side in the UP, 3 points on a side in the NLP, and 4 points on a side in the Southern Lower. People blanch at 4 points on a side. You're protecting just about exactly the same number of bucks with a 4 point on a side in the Southern Lower as you are now today in the Northwest 12. Right around just north of 70%. So that concludes my talk. Thanks.